Okay, good morning. It is Saturday. This is A Course in Miracles podcast, YouTube video, and I titled this based on something I read yesterday. I'm going to read this. It says, "Nothing and everything cannot coexist. To believe in one is to deny the other. Fear is really nothing, and love is everything." So, yeah. So if you have two emotions, one is love and one is fear, you're operating out of one or the other all the time. And uh, in yesterday's reading, it talked about you can't master fear because fear is actually nothing. It's not nothing to you because that's actually how we uh, operate. We operate from a fear-based thought system. That's right. That's why the home of the ego is the body. It's also referred to as the seat of fear. Um, yeah. So I'm gonna. I think this is where I left off yesterday. So we're gonna finish chapter 2 of A Course in Miracles. You're welcome to follow along. We are in the section Cause and Effect, and we're probably 6, 7 paragraphs down from there. And I am reading the edited version. I actually like the Urtext much better. The problem is with the first 3 or 4 chapters of the Urtext, there's a lot of stuff in there that is a little bit complicated. That's why it was edited out. Unfortunately, I think Wapnick took some stuff out, especially of chapter 4, and you can look at it for yourself, because I know there's some Wapnick fans out there. Look at Right Teaching and Right Learning in the Urtext version, which is www.courseinmiracles.com. Read that and then try to find that section in the unedited version and then make your own conclusion based on that. Because there's so much good stuff in the Urtext under Right Teaching and Right Learning. It's probably one of my favorite sections of the course and the text anyways. So it should especially be noted that God has only one son. If all his creations are his sons, everyone must be an integral part of the whole sonship. And you are an integral part. It says your part is essential in God's plan for salvation, right? And it says, there's another lesson that says, I am the Savior of the world. Another lesson, I am among the ministers of God. The sonship in its oneness transcends the sum of its parts. However, this is obscured as long as any of its parts is missing. That is why the conflict cannot ultimately be resolved until all parts of the sonship have returned. Only then can the meaning of wholeness in the true sense be understood. Any part of the sonship can believe in error or incompleteness if he so chooses. However, if he does so, he's believing in the existence of nothingness. The correction of the error is in the atonement. Or you could say at one-ment, right? This oneness, this equality of the sonship, this union. I've already briefly spoken about readiness, but some additional points might be helpful here. Readiness is only the prerequisite for accomplishment. The two should not be confused. As soon as a state of readiness occurs, there is usually some degree of desire to accomplish, but it is by no means necessarily undivided. Right? So you can say, oh, I want this, I'm ready for this, I have a willingness to undergo a transformation, I want to recover, I want to stop being addicted, I want to stop attacking my brother. Well, then how do I accomplish that? What are the steps that I need to take to at least move in that direction? The state does not imply more than a potential for a change in mind. Confidence cannot develop fully until mastery has been accomplished. We have already attempted to correct the fundamental error that fear can be mastered. So you can't master nothingness. You can't master nothing, which is what fear is, and have emphasized that only real mastery is through love. So it's saying I have to have confidence Confidence cannot develop fully until mastery has been accomplished. Mastery of what? Mastery of love, mastery of charity, mastery of extension, mastery of giving. Readiness is only the beginning of confidence. You may think this implies that an enormous amount of time is necessary between readiness and mastery, but let me remind you that time and space are under my control. That's Jesus speaking. He's saying that let me remind you that time and space are under my control. The meaning of the last judgment. I mean, that's what the miracle is for. The miracle is for someone who finds themselves in time and space. And here we are. We find ourselves in time and space. One of the ways, this is section 8 now, this is the last section in chapter 2, the meaning of the last judgment. One of the ways in which you can correct the magic miracle confusion is to remember that you did not create yourself. You are apt to forget this when you become egocentric, and this puts you in a position where a belief in magic is virtually inevitable. Your will to create was given you by your creator, who was expressing the same will in his creation. Since creative ability rests in the mind, everything you create is necessarily a matter of will. It also follows that whatever you alone make is real in your own sight, though not in the mind of God, right? This is how you can imagine that you're separate from God and live in a world that was meant to be a place where God could enter not, and have substitutes for God, which are idols, and you can experience fear and hatred and attack and defense and death and suffering. This basic distinction leads directly into the real meaning of the last judgment. The last judgment is one of the most threatening ideas in your thinking. This is because you do not understand it. Judgment is not an attribute of God. It was brought into being after the separation, when it became one of the many learning devices to be built into the overall plan. Just as the separation occurred over millions of years, the last judgment will extend over a similarly long period, and perhaps an even longer one. Its length, however, can be greatly shortened by miracles, the device for shortening but not abolishing time. So a miracle is a device for shortening time but not abolishing it. If a sufficient number become truly miracle-minded, this shortening process can be virtually immeasurable. It is essential, however, that you free yourself from fear quickly, because you must emerge from the conflict if you are to bring peace to other minds. Right? There's a lot of guys in the Course in Miracles community that says that you shouldn't teach, that Course in Miracles is an individual self-study program. And yet I mean, why do we have a teacher's manual? I always think this is funny, these interpretations. I don't believe that we should use the teaching as a form of exchange for money and all the other things that we do down here. But that's all in the course also. And again, if you look at the video that is on my YouTube channel, the first one, it talks about that. I read all about that money for therapy and money for healing. The last judgment is generally thought of as a procedure undertaken by God. Actually, it'll be undertaken by my brothers with my help. Wow. Okay. It is a final healing rather than a meting out of punishment, however much you may think that punishment is deserved. Punishment is a concept totally opposed to right-mindedness, and the aim of the last judgment is to restore right-mindedness to you. Isn't it funny? I mean, if you talk to a Christian, or they're always talking about hellfire and punishment, and and then you say, well, I don't believe in hell, and they go, well, you'll find out. You're going to find out. My God. The last judgment might be called a process of right evaluation. It simply means that everyone will finally come to understand what is worthy and what is not, right? What's valuable and what's valueless. After this, the ability to choose can be directed rationally. Until this distinction is made, however, the vacillations between free and imprisoned will cannot but continue. The first step toward freedom involves a sorting out of the false from the true. This is a process of separation in the constructive sense and reflects the true meaning of the apocalypse. Everyone will ultimately look upon his own creations and choose to preserve only what is good, just as his God himself looked upon what he had created and knew that it was good, which would be you. This is my son of whom I am well pleased. At this point, the mind can begin to look with love on its own creations because of their worthiness. At the same time, the mind will inevitably disown its miscreations, which, without belief, will no longer exist. Right? Because if you disown something, you're not valuing it anymore. If it's not real, it'll disappear on its own. The term last judgment is frightening, not only because it has been projected onto God, but also because of the association of last with death. This is an outstanding example of upside down perception. If the meaning of the last judgment is objectively examined, it is quite apparent that it is really the doorway to life. No one who lives in fear is really alive. That's why Jesus could say, let the dead bury the dead. Your own last judgment cannot be directed toward yourself because you are not your own creation. You can, however, apply it meaningfully and at any time to everything you have made. And retain in your memory only what is creative and good. That is why your right-mindedness cannot but dictate. This is what your right-mindedness cannot but dictate. The purpose of time is solely to give you time to achieve this judgment. It is your own perfect judgment of your own perfect creations. When everything you retain is lovable, there is no reason for fear to remain within you. This is your part in the atonement. You know, you could look at that as like the 12th step when you're making amends. Because you clean up your side of the street and you realize that your side of the street was the whole side of the street. And you detach from everything that isn't loving, right? Because it's not serving you. It's not edifying you. It's not anything. It's not valuable. So chapter 3, the innocent perception, atonement without sacrifice. A further point must be perfectly clear before any residual fear still associated with miracles can disappear. The crucifixion did not establish the atonement, the resurrection did. And again, this is that upside down perception. A lot of people are out there teaching, especially Christianity, and all different denominations of Christianity are always talking about the crucifixion, about how Jesus died for your sins. Many sincere Christians have misunderstood this. No one who is free of the belief in scarcity could possibly make this mistake. If the crucifixion is seen from an upside down point of view, it does appear as if God permitted and even encouraged one of his sons to suffer because he was good, right? He had to pay for your sins. This particularly unfortunate interpretation, which arose out of projection, has led many people to be bitterly afraid of God. Such anti-religious concepts enter into many religions, yet the real Christian should pause and ask, how could this be? Is it likely that God himself would be capable of this kind of thinking, which his own words have clearly stated is unworthy of his son? The best defense is not attack another's position, but rather to protect the truth. It is unwise to accept any concept if you have to invest a whole frame of reference in order to justify it. This procedure is painful in its minor applications and genuinely tragic on a wider scale. Persecution frequently results in an attempt to justify the terrible misperception that God himself persecuted his own son on behalf of salvation, right? So many years ago, they used to have the Great Crusades where they went around and said, switch over to Christianity, There's a word for it. I just had it in my mind, it slipped out of my head. Conform, or we kill you. Convert, there it is. Convert to Christianity, give up your pagan religion, and you'll be spared. If not, we have to kill you. Craziness. The very words are meaningless. It has been particularly difficult to overcome this because although the error itself is no harder to correct than any other, many have been unwilling to give it up in a view of its prominent value as a defense. In milder forms, a parent says, my father used to say this all the time, this hurts me more than it hurts you, and feels exonerated in beating a child. Can you believe our Father really thinks this way? It is so essential that all such thinking be dispelled that we must be sure that nothing of this kind remains in your mind. I was not punished because you were bad. That doesn't even make any sense, but that's what's out there. The holy benign lesson the atonement teaches is lost if it is tainted with this kind of distortion in any form. The statement, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, is a misperception by which one assigns his own evil past to God. The evil past has nothing to do with God. He did not create it and he does not maintain it. God does not believe in retribution. His mind does not create that way. He does not hold your evil deeds against you, right? You want to make God into Santa Claus, like he's watching you and writing down all the bad stuff you're doing and see if you deserve heaven or not. It is likely that he would hold them. Is it likely that he would hold them against me? Be very sure that you recognize how utterly impossible this assumption is and how entirely it arises from projection. This kind of error is responsible for a host of related errors, including the belief that God rejected Adam and forced him out of the Garden of Eden. It is also why you may believe from time to time that I am misdirecting you. I have made every effort to use words that are almost impossible to distort, but it is always possible to twist symbols around if you wish, right? And this is obvious. If I put this thing out on YouTube and put it all over Facebook, you're going to get a myriad of comments on the bottom of the things, and there's going to be people that say, "Oh, I love this. This is great. It's clear to me now." There's going to be other people that say, "Oh, he's a false prophet. He's the guy's the devil even." And what am I saying? I'm saying that God is love, and evil doesn't have any power. That's why in the Bible he says, "Resist not evil," because if I defend myself, I'll be attacked, right? And it is the opposite of what the world believes. That's why it's so hard to believe. Why? Because you've been conditioned by the world's thinking. Your learning is a direct result, comes from the world. So, right, this is a complete disruption. But if you would look at it reasonably, use your mind, use your own mind, and look at it. Go, is that reasonable? Does that make any sense? And that's why, you know, you have to read this for yourself and you have to pray for discernment. Sacrifice is a notion totally unknown to God. It arises solely from fear, and frightened people can be vicious. Sacrificing in any way is a violation of my injunction that you should be merciful even as your Father in heaven is merciful. It has been hard for many Christians to realize this applies to themselves. God's teachers never terrorize their students. To terrorize is to attack, and this results in rejection of what the teacher offers. The result is learning failure. I mean, what good does it do to scare people into believing in God? I mean, why would you, the very thing that you need to pray to, or that you need to go to, you're going to be afraid of? I have been correctly referred to as the Lamb of God who taketh away the sins of the world, but those who represent the Lamb as bloodstained do not understand the meaning of the symbol. Correctly understood, it is a very simple symbol that speaks of my innocence. The lion and the lamb lying down together symbolize that strength and innocence are not in conflict, but naturally live in peace. Blessed are the pure in heart, for thou shalt see God, is another way of saying the same thing. A pure mind knows the truth, and that is its strength. It does not confuse destruction with innocence, because it associates innocence with strength, not with weakness. Innocence is incapable of sacrificing anything, because the innocent mind has everything and strives only to protect its wholeness. It cannot project, it can only honor other minds, because honor is the natural greetings of the truly loved to others who are like them. The Lamb taketh away the sins of the world, in the sense that the state of innocence or grace is one in which the meaning of the atonement is perfectly apparent. The atonement is entirely unambiguous. It is perfectly clear because it exists in light. Only the attempts to shroud it in darkness have made it inaccessible to those who do not choose to see. The atonement itself radiates nothing but truth. It therefore epitomizes harmlessness and sheds only blessing. It could not do this if it arose from anything but perfect innocence. Innocence is, I love this. He keeps talking about innocence, and he says, you have to be like a little child in order to enter heaven. Why? Because a child is innocent. A child doesn't have all these ideas and doesn't want to argue concepts or prove a point. It's just innocent. It's in wonder. It's in acceptance. It's like, oh, you know, it's not judging. It's not prejudicial. Innocence is wisdom because it is unaware of evil, and evil does not exist. It is, however, perfectly aware of everything that is true. The resurrection demonstrated that nothing can destroy truth. Did you hear that? The resurrection demonstrated that nothing can destroy truth. God can withstand any form of evil as light abolishes forms of darkness. I just got it. When I always talk about how Pilate asked Jesus, what is truth? And Jesus didn't say anything. Well, the truth was standing right in front of him. I am the way, the truth, and the light, right? But because Pilate didn't know who he was, he couldn't recognize who it was that was standing right in front of him. Because Pilate is also the way, the truth, and the light. He's just unaware of it, right? He's reduced himself down to whatever his title was in the Roman Empire. The resurrection demonstrated that nothing can destroy truth. Good can withstand any form of evil, as light always abolishes forms of darkness. The atonement is therefore the perfect lesson. It is the final demonstration that all other lessons I taught are true. If you accept this one generalization now, there will be no need to learn from any smaller lessons. You are released from all errors if you believe this. So he says, you are released from all errors if you believe this. And it's like the mind skips over everything and goes, well, believes what? What is it I need to believe? Well, let's back up. Good can withstand any form of evil, as light abolishes forms of darkness. The atonement is therefore the perfect lesson. It is the final demonstration that all other lessons I taught are true. If you can accept this one generalization now, there's no need to learn from any smaller lessons. So it's the atonement, the atonement. I accept atonement for myself. I accept that everyone is me, that we are all equal, and that we're all created by love, and that everybody is deserving of that love. The innocence of God is the true state of mind of his Son. In this state, your mind knows God, for God is not symbolic, he is a fact. Wow, God is not symbolic, he is a fact. Knowing his Son as he is, you realize that the atonement, not sacrifice, is the only appropriate gift for God's altar, where nothing except perfection belongs. The understanding of the innocent is truth. That is why their altars are truly radiant. Wow, so what if guilt is hell, what is its opposite, right? So I'm learning that I'm innocent. I'm learning that I am perfect as God created me. I'm learning that my limited ideas about myself aren't true. I'm learning that I've never was what I was pretending to be my entire life. that there's more to me than meets the eye? I mean, that fear is nothing and love is everything, and love created me like itself? Is that a revelatory idea that I can experience? That all that I have comes from God? God is the mind with which I think. I actually have all power in heaven and earth. Miracles is true perception. I have stated that the basic concepts referred to in this course are not matters of degrees. Certain fundamental concepts cannot be understood in terms of opposites. It is impossible to conceive of light and darkness or everything and nothing as joint possibilities. They are all true or all false. It is essential that you realize your thinking will be erratic until a firm commitment to one or the other is made. A firm commitment, a full commitment, right? This is what none of us like, because we associate a full commitment with sacrificing something else, something of value. If you're giving something up, it doesn't have any value at all. And if you're making a full commitment and a firm commitment to light, what could you possibly lose? And nobody else will lose either. A firm commitment to darkness or nothingness, however, is impossible. No one has ever lived who has not experienced some light in something. No one, therefore, is able to deny truth totally, even if he thinks he can, right? Of course, this message is going to be denied. Why wouldn't it be? Innocence is not a partial attribute. It is not real until it is total. Wow. Innocence is not a partial attribute. It is not real until it is total. The partly innocent are apt to be quite foolish at times. It is not until their innocence becomes a viewpoint with universal application that it becomes wisdom. Love it. It is not until their innocence becomes a viewpoint with universal application that it becomes wisdom. Because what happens? I accept my own innocence, and then I start to see, oh, no matter what people are doing in form, they're also innocent. Innocent or true perception means that you never misperceive and always see truly. So I'll see past appearances because I know who my brother truly is, not even if he's acting out. More simply, it means that you never see what does not exist and always see what does. When you lack confidence in what someone will do, you are attesting to your belief that he is not in his right mind. This is hardly a miracle-based frame of reference. It also has the disastrous effect of denying the power of the miracle. The miracle perceives everything as it is. If nothing but the truth exists, right-mindedness seeing cannot see anything but perfection. See, this is the opposite. This is why it says this is the opposite of the way that you see now. I don't see perfection in everything that I see. So then I've got to make a decision in this moment. This is what's so crucial about this. It's the only time that I can make the decision. Am I willing to see the perfection of my brother, no matter what the appearance is, what he's showing me? Can I bypass my ears and my eyes and use spiritual vision? Vision is my greatest need. Can I see that my brother is whole and perfect? This is why I need a miracle. The miracle perceives everything as it is. If nothing but the truth exists, right-minded seeing cannot see anything but perfection. I have said that only what God creates or what you create with the same will has any real existence. This, then, is all the innocent can see. They do not suffer from distorted perception. Right? He says, you look through a glass darkly. When I look through a beer bottle, which is a glass darkly, everything I see through it is distorted and warped. It's not what's there. It's the lens that I'm looking through that is translating miscreation back to me. But that idea had to start before the lens, had to start in my thoughts and my belief system. You are afraid of God's will because you've used your own mind, which he created in the likeness of his own, to miscreate. There it is. The mind can miscreate only when it believes it is not free. An imprisoned mind is not free because it is possessed or held back by itself. What holds the world in chains but my beliefs? What are my beliefs? Limitation. What is God? Unlimited. It is therefore limited, and its will is not free to assert itself. To be one is to be of one mind or will. When the will of the Sonship and the Father are one, their perfect accord is heaven. Nothing can prevail against the Son of God who commends his spirit into the hands of his Father. That's why I say, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. Not just for the camera, not just for a class, but for me, right? When I'm alone, Father, in thy hands I commend my spirit. A moment-to-moment prayer that I hold dear in my heart and my mind. By doing this, the mind awakens from its sleep and remembers its creator. All sense of separation disappears. The Son of God is part of the Holy Trinity, but the Trinity itself is one. There is no confusion within its levels because they are one mind and one will. It's always a question I get when I get into a deep conversation with a Jehovah's Witness or a Christian or someone. They're always mentioning the Trinity. Well, do you believe in the Trinity? This single purpose creates perfect integration, establishes the peace of God. Yet the vision can be perceived only by the truly innocent, because their hearts are pure. The innocent defend true perception instead of defending themselves against it. Understanding the lesson of the atonement, they are without the wish to attack, and therefore they see truly. This is what the Bible means when it says, when he shall appear or be perceived, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is, right? As he is in truth. Can I see you as you are in truth, not even how you view yourself, or how I view myself in limitation, and then project that onto you. The way to correct distortions is to withdraw your faith in them and invest it only in what is true. You cannot make untruth true. If you are willing to accept what is true in everything you perceive, you will let it be true for you. Truth overcomes all error, and those who live in error and emptiness can never find lasting solace. If you perceive truly, you are canceling out misperceptions in yourself and others simultaneously. Because you see them as they are, you offer them your acceptance of the truth so they can accept it for themselves. This is the healing that the miracle induces. So you see your brother further ahead in time than he actually is. Right? If we were perfect, we wouldn't be here. But what am I asked to do? I'm asked to see his perfection. Perception versus knowledge. No wonder the Course tells me that nothing I see means anything, that I give all the meaning it has for me. We have been emphasizing perception, and we have said very little about knowledge as yet. This is because perception must be straightened out before you can know anything, right? My perception has to be straightened out. Father, straighten my mind, for it is sick. To know is to be certain. Uncertainty means that you do not know. Knowledge is power because it is certain, and certainty is strength. Perception is temporary. As an attribute of the belief in space and time, it is subject to either fear or love. Misperceptions produce fear, and true perceptions foster love. But neither brings certainty because all perception varies. That is why it is not knowledge. True perception is the basis for knowledge, but knowing is the affirmation of truth and beyond all perceptions. Right? That's why I always find it a joke when somebody says, what does that mean to you? What does that passage in the Course mean to you? I need to straighten out my perception first. All your difficulties stem from the fact that you do not recognize yourself, your brother, or God. right? When you see all, pay attention. All your difficulties stem from the fact that you do not recognize yourself, your brother, or God. To recognize means to know again, implying that you knew before. You can see in many ways because, you can see in many ways because perception involves interpretation, and this means that it's not whole or consistent, right? This is the problem with interpreting the Course, interpreting anything. The miracle, being a way of perceiving, is not knowledge. It is the right answer to a question, but you do not question when you know. Questioning illusions is the first step in undoing them. The miracle or the right answer corrects them. Since perceptions change, their dependence on time is obvious. How you perceive at any given time determines what you do. The actions must occur in time. Knowledge is timeless because certainty is not questionable. You know when you have ceased, there you go. You know when you've ceased to ask questions. The questioning mind perceives itself in time and therefore looks for future answers. The closed mind believes the future and the present will be the same. This establishes a seemingly stable state that is usually an attempt to counteract the underlying fear that the future will be worse than the present. This fear inhibits the tendency to question at all. True vision is the natural perception of spiritual sight, but it is still a correction rather than a fact. Spiritual sight is symbolic and therefore not a device for knowing. It is, however, a means of right perception which brings it into the proper domain of the miracle. A vision of God would be a miracle rather than a revelation. The fact that perception is involved at all removes the experience from the realm of knowledge. That is why visions, however holy, do not last. The Bible tells you to know yourself or to be certain. Certainty is always of God. When you love someone, you have perceived him as he is, and thus makes it possible for you to know him. Until you first perceive him as he is, you cannot know him. While you ask questions about him, you are clearly implying that you do not know God. Certainty does not require action. When you say you are acting on the basis of knowledge, you are really confusing knowledge with perception. Knowledge provides the strength for creative thinking, but not for right doing. Perception, miracles, and doing are closely related, right? So it's like perception, miracles, and doing are closely related. Why? Because they're all in time. Knowledge is the result of revelation, induces only thought. Even in its most spiritualized form, perception involves the body. Knowledge comes from the altar within and is timeless because it is certain. To perceive the truth is not the same as to know it. Right perception is necessary before God can communicate directly to his altars, which he established in his sons. There he can communicate his certainty, and his knowledge will bring peace without question. God is not a stranger to his sons, and his sons are not strangers to each other. Knowledge preceded both perception and time and will ultimately replace them. That is the real meaning of Alpha and Omega, the beginning of the end, and before Abraham was, I am. Perception can and must be stabilized, but knowledge is stable. Fear God and keep his commandment becomes know God and accept his certainty. If you attack error in another, you will hurt yourself. You know your brother. You cannot know your brother when you attack him. Attack is always made upon a stranger. You are making him a stranger by misperceiving him, and so you cannot know him. It is because you have made him a stranger that you are afraid of him. Perceive him correctly so you can know him. There are no strangers in God's creation. To create as he created, you can create only what you know and therefore accept as yours. God knows his children with perfect certainty. He created them by knowing them. He recognizes them perfectly. When they do not recognize each other, they do not recognize him. Error and ego. The abilities you now possess are only shadows of your real strength. All your present functions are divided and open to question and doubt. This is because you are not certain how you will use them and are therefore incapable of knowledge. You're also incapable of knowledge because you can still perceive lovelessly. Right? This is the frustrating part, because I know what he's saying is true. Right? I can still perceive lovelessly. Perception did not exist until the separation introduced degrees, aspect, and intervals. Spirit has no levels, and all conflict arises from the concept of levels. Only the levels of the Trinity are capable of unity. The levels created by the separation cannot but conflict. This is because they are meaningless to each other. Consciousness, the level of perception, was the first split introduced to the mind after the separation, making the mind a perceiver rather than a creator. Consciousness is correctly identified as the domain of the ego. The ego is a wrong-minded attempt to perceive yourself as you wish to be rather than as you are. Yet you can know yourself only as you are, because that is all you can be sure of. Everything else is open to question. The ego is the questioning aspect of the post-separation self, which was made rather than created. It is capable of asking questions, but not of perceiving meaningful answers, because those would involve knowledge and cannot be perceived. The mind is therefore confused, because only one-mindedness can be without confusion. A separated or divided mind must be confused. That's the ego. I'm a split mind, I'm a separated mind, and that's why I must be confused. It is necessarily uncertain about what it is, it has to be in conflict because it is out of accord with itself. This makes its aspects strangers to each other, and this is the essence of the fear-prone condition, in which the attack is always possible. You have every reason to feel afraid as you perceive yourself. This is why you cannot escape from fear until you realize that you did not and could not create yourself. You can never make your misperceptions true, and your creation is beyond your own error. That is why you must eventually choose to heal the separation. Why? Because the separation only occurs in your own mind. Right-mindedness is not to be confused with the knowing mind, because it is applicable only to right perception. You can be right-minded or wrong-minded, and even this is subject to degrees, clearly demonstrating that knowledge is not involved. The term right-mindedness is properly used as the correction for wrong-mindedness, and applies to the state of mind that induces accurate perception. Right? Perception is always involved in time. It is miracle-minded because it heals misperception, and this is indeed a miracle in view of how you perceive yourself. Perception always involves some misuse of mind, because it brings the mind into the areas of uncertainty. The mind is very active. When it chooses to be separated, it chooses to perceive. Until then, it wills only to know. Afterwards, it can only choose ambiguously, and the only way out of ambiguity is clear perception. The mind returns to its proper function only when it wills to know. This places it in the service of spirit, where perception is changed. The mind chooses to divide itself when it chooses to make its own levels, but it could not entirely separate itself from spirit, because it is from spirit that it derives its whole power to make or create. Even in misperception, the mind is affirming its source, or it would merely cease to be. This is impossible, because the mind belongs to the spirit which God created and which is therefore eternal. The ability to perceive made the body possible, because you must perceive something and with something. That is why perception involves an exchange or translation, which knowledge does not need. The interpretive function of perception, a distorted form of creation, then permits you to interpret the body as yourself in an attempt to escape from the conflict that you have induced. Secret of salvation, I'm but doing this to myself. Spirit which knows could not be reconciled with this loss of power, because it is incapable of darkness. This makes spirit almost inaccessible to the mind and entirely inaccessible to the body. Therefore, spirit is perceived as a threat, because light abolishes darkness merely by showing you it's not there. Truth will always overcome error in this way. This cannot be an active process of correction, because I've already emphasized, knowledge does not do anything. It can be perceived as an attacker, but it cannot attack. What you perceive as its attacks is your own vague recognition that knowledge can always be remembered, never having been destroyed. God and his creations remain in surety, and therefore know that no miscreation exists. Truth cannot deal with errors that you want. I was a man who remembered spirit and its knowledge. As a man, I did not attempt to counteract error with knowledge, but to correct error from the bottom up. I demonstrated both the powerlessness of the body and the power of the mind by uniting my will with that of my Creator. I naturally remembered spirit and its real purpose. I cannot unite your will with God's for you, but I can erase all your misperceptions from your mind if you will bring it under my guidance. Only your misperceptions stand in your way. Without them, your choice is certain. Sane perception induces sane choosing. I cannot choose for you, but I can help you make your own right choice. Many are called, but few are chosen, should be. All are called, but few choose to listen. Right? Therefore, they do not choose right. The chosen ones are merely those who chose right sooner. Right minds can do this now, and they will find rest unto their souls. God knows you only in peace, and this is your reality. Right? That's why all decisions are joint decisions. Am I making a choice with the Holy Spirit, or am I making a choice with the Antichrist? And that's, and the Antichrist is nothing. You're not choosing anything. You're just choosing not to be in your natural state. Amazing ideas, it's like, I don't know how valuable it is to sit here and read A Course in Miracles to you or to the computer. It's valuable in the sense that I'm willing to listen to what it says, right? And to undergo this process, because I'm reading the text and I'm like, yes, I want to understand what this is saying. And I need all the help in the universe because because of my own interference, my own idea that I am split in my mind, that I am a perceiving entity, right? That, let's see, if I'm going to read a little bit more. I have said that the abilities you possess are only shadows of your real strength, and that perception which is inherently judgmental was introduced only after the separation. No one has been sure of anything since. I've also made it clear that the resurrection was the means for the return to knowledge, which was accomplished by the union of my will with the Father's. We can now establish a distinction that will clarify some of our subsequent statements. Since the separation, the words create and make have become confused. When you make something, you do so out of a specific sense of lack or need. Anything made for a specific purpose has no true general, can't even say that word, generalizability. When you make something to fulfill a perceived lack, you are tacitly implying that you believe in separation. The ego has invented many ingenious thought systems for this purpose. None of them is creative. Inventiveness is a wasted effort, even in its most ingenious form. The highly specific nature of invention is not worthy of the abstract creativity of God's creations. Knowing, as we have already observed, does not lead to doing. The confusion between your real creation and what you have made of yourself is so profound that it will become literally impossible for you to know anything. Knowledge is always stable, and it's quite evident that you are not. saying you're not stable. Nevertheless, you are perfectly stable as God created you. In this sense, when your behavior is unstable, you are disagreeing with God's idea of your creation. You can do this if you choose, but you would hardly want to do it if you were in your right mind. The fundamental question you continually ask yourself cannot be properly be directed to yourself at all. You keep asking what it is you are. This implies that the answer is not only one you know, but also one that it is up to you to supply. Yet you cannot perceive yourself correctly. You have no image to be perceived. The word image is always perception related. Lesson 15, these thoughts are images that I have made. It calls you an image maker and a part of knowledge. Images are symbolic and stand for something else. The idea of changing your image recognizes the power of perception, but also implies that there is nothing stable to know. Here it is. Knowing is not open to interpretation. You may try to interpret meaning, but this is always open to error because it refers to the perception of meaning. Such incongruities are the result of attempts to regard yourself as separated and unseparated at the same time. It is impossible to make so fundamental a confusion without increasing your overall confusion still further. Your mind may have become very ingenious, but as always happens when method and content are separated, it is utilized in a futile attempt to escape from an inescapable impasse. Ingenuity is totally divorced from knowledge because knowledge does not require ingenuity. Ingenious thinking is not the truth that shall set you free, but you are free of the need to engage in it when you are willing. I can't speak English right now. It's amazing. It's like my mind is speeding up and it's going faster than the words that I'm trying to read. Let's slow it down. Ingenious thinking is not the truth that shall set you free, but you are free of the need to engage in it when you are willing to let it go. Yeah, but you're free of the need to engage in it when you're willing to let it go. Obviously, when you're done with it, you won't need to be ingenious anymore. Truth is actually quite simple. Ingenuity is of the ego. Prayer is a way of asking for something, is the medium of miracles. But the only meaningful prayer is for forgiveness, because those who have been forgiven have everything. Those who have been forgiven have everything. So prayer is the medium for miracles. It's telling me right here and right now that the only meaningful prayer is for forgiveness. Once forgiveness has been accepted, prayer in the usual sense becomes utterly meaningless. The prayer for forgiveness is nothing more than a request that you be able to recognize, to know again what you already have. And electing perception instead of knowledge, you place yourself in a position where you would remember your Father only by perceiving miraculously. You have lost the knowledge that you yourself are a miracle of God. You have lost the knowledge that you yourself are a miracle of God. Creation is your source and your only real function. The statement, God created man in his own image and likeness, needs reinterpretation. Image can be understood as thought, and likeness as of true quality. God did create spirit in his own thought and of quality like to his own. There's nothing else. Perception, on the other hand, is impossible without a belief in more or less. At every level, it involves selectivity. Perception is a continual process of accepting and rejecting, organizing and reorganizing, shifting and changing. Evaluation is an essential part of perception because judgments are necessary in order to select. Amazing. What happens to perceptions if there are no judgments and nothing but perfect equality? Perception becomes impossible. Truth can only be known. All of it is equally true, and knowing any part of it is to know all of it. Only perception involves partial awareness. This is why it says the natural state of the mind is complete abstraction. What's that mean? Non-selectivity, non-specialness. Non-specificness. It's not specific. Abstract is non-specific. Everything becomes the same. Knowledge transcends the laws governing perception because partial knowledge is impossible. It is all one and has no separate parts. You who are really one with it need but know yourself, and your knowledge is complete. To know God's miracle is to know Him. Forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. Correct perception of your brother is necessary because minds have chosen to see themselves as separate. Spirit knows God completely. That is its miraculous power. The fact that each one has there it goes again. The fact that each one has this power completely is a condition entirely alien to the world's thinking. The world believes that if anyone has everything, there is nothing left. But God's miracles are as total as His thoughts because they are His thoughts. As long as perception lasts, prayer has a place. Since perception rests on lack, those who perceive have not totally accepted the atonement and given themselves over to truth. Perception is based on a separated state so that anyone who perceives it all needs healing. Isn't that amazing? And everybody here in space and time perceives. You can't escape this, right? You can fight with this, you can fight with me, you can turn off the channel, you can throw your Course in Miracles in the garbage, but it's not going to make what I just read any less true. This is where people get really frustrated because we go, well, no, I don't want it to be this way. I want it thus, I want it thus. So I'm going to read it again. As long as perception lasts, prayer has a place. Since perception rests on lack, those who perceive have not totally accepted the atonement and given themselves over to truth. Perception is based on a separated state, so that anyone who perceives it all needs healing. Communion, not prayer, is the natural state of those who know. God and His miracle are inseparable. How beautiful indeed are the thoughts of God who live in His light. Your worth is beyond perception because it is beyond doubt. Do not perceive yourself in different lights. Know yourself in the one light, right? This is true singularity, true oneness. Know yourself in the one light where the miracle that is you is perfectly clear. Absolutely amazing. And it's like, this takes a moment of integration. So it's like, okay, you hear me read this or you've read it yourself. And I have read this before, and yet I'm reading it for the first time because it's like, I'm willing to accept what that says. And it's like, oh my God, you know, it's funny because you can say, well, I've been doing this for 16 years. No, I haven't. I can only do it now. I can only come into this moment and say, Father, in thy hands I commend my spirit, and I'm confused because I'm in perception and I need help. I need healing. Heal, straighten my mind, right? I need a miracle. That's the only way that this is going to come about. Or I need the mind training. It's the only way that this is going to come about. So where are we at for time? I think we're done. When I start to trip over my words, I feel like I'm slurring or something. It's time to stop. So yeah, contemplate, meditate on this, you know, invite the corrective, right? There is a God. God is like it says, God is a fact. Forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. Okay, I need forgiveness. Vision is my greatest need. Forgiveness is the key to happiness. I have to immerse myself, right? This is a total commitment. So I'm by teaching, by listening, I'm immersing myself in the truth. By reading the Course in Miracles, by doing the lessons and contemplating on these ideas and remembering God, I remember myself. And by remembering God, I remember who my brother is truly, that my brother is innocent, and that I can practice mercy no matter what he's doing in form. This seems to be a challenge. And I can only speak from my personal experience because I've had this beautiful teaching for 16 years. And yet I'm only seeing it now for the first time. Oh my gosh, what do I want? Do I want this to be true? Am I willing to let this be true instead of what I want it to be true? Am I willing to surrender totally? I stood at the turning point. I stood at the turning point with complete abandon. The result was nil until I let go absolutely. Am I willing to let go absolutely and totally say, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. I turn my will and life over to the care of God. Step 3. So thanks for joining me, whoever it is that watches this video. I don't know how I'm going to disseminate this or if I'm going to disseminate it. We will eventually go to Zoom. This has total value. This book has total value to me, and I'm going to continue to do this regardless, right? This is what I do. So thank you and have a blessed Saturday.